So if you're learning English right now, or maybe you know someone who's just sort of hit that wall, that really frustrating plateau. You know, you're past the absolute basics, but you just can't seem to get to that point where you feel truly fluent, confident, spontaneous.
Yeah.
Then you know that struggle. It's really real. It feels like this overwhelming world of, you know, grammar apps, vocab lists.
Oh, absolutely. And just this constant feeling you're sort of swimming against this huge tide of information, right?
Exactly.
And you know, the information overload, that's precisely what trips up so many learners, especially intermediate, even advanced ones.
What so?
Well, they try to do everything at once. They hear about a strategy, try it intensely for like a weekend, then another one.
Sporadically.
Sporadically, exactly. And then they wonder why they don't see lasting progress. So today we really want to cut through all that noise.
Okay, good. Because our mission here is pretty clear. We've really dug into the source material. We're talking applies linguistics research, cognitive science, about memory, strategies from people who've actually become really successful language learners.
Proven stuff.
Proven stuff. And we've boiled it down to 15 powerful, genuinely actionable ways you can transform your English learning. We're trying to move beyond the sort of standard textbook advice here.
Right. Getting into the real mechanics of how you actually master this stuff. We've kind of grouped these 15 techniques. There are core habits, foundational things. Then strategies for really maximizing your input, you know, training your ear, training your eye, then activating output, actually speaking and writing effectively.
And then some more advanced stuff.
Yeah, and finally some, let's call them next level linguistic hacks. Things that help you sound genuinely natural, more spontaneous, because the ultimate goal for you, the listener, isn't just being understood, right?
Yeah.
It's achieving that spontaneity.
That effortless flow. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with that foundational framework. Because you're right, without the right habits in place, none of the cool techniques are going to stick, are they?
Not a chance.
And the sources, they make this really strong point right away, distinguishing between just being busy and actually being effective.
Whew.
Which brings us to tip number 1. Consistency over intensity.
This is fundamentally the bedrock principle. It's framed perfectly. Consistency beats intensity. Simple as that.
We see it all the time, don't we? Learners trying to cram for like 6 hours solid every Saturday.
Oh yeah, and they crash and burn. It's exhausting, and honestly, it's just not how the brain learns language efficiently. All the cognitive research we looked at points to the same thing. Your brain processes and holds onto language best through consistent spaced exposure.
Right, spaced repetition.
Exactly, not massive, infrequent dumps of information.
And the practical advice here isn't overwhelming either. It's not 6 hours. The recommendation is what? Even just 15 minutes a day.
Just 15 minutes, seriously. Spent doing something in English, reading an article, listening to a short podcast bit, even just talking to yourself.
Okay, but why? Why is that 15 minutes daily so much better than, say, a 3-hour block on a Sunday?
It really comes down to how our memory functions. You know the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve?
Vaguely, yeah. You forget things over time unless you reinforce them.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So if you have these huge gaps between your practice sessions, your brain basically starts forgetting. When you finally sit down for that big weekend session, the first chunk of your time is just spent trying to reactivate those neural pathways that have already started to fade.
You're just catching up to where you were last time.
You're essentially rebuilding instead of building on that 15 minutes daily. It's critical because it keeps the vocabulary, the grammar concepts, it keeps them active in your working memory. You're maintaining the connection, not constantly trying to patch it up. It stops the progress clock from resetting every week.
That makes complete sense. It's about building momentum, like you said, not just applying brute force occasionally. Okay, so consistency is pillar number 1. The sources pair this with a crucial mindset, which is actually tip 15. But you're right, we need to talk about it now because it supports everything else.
Definitely.
It's the journey mindset. Be patient and celebrate progress.
Yeah, this is like the psychological armor you need for the long haul. Learning English, improving significantly. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And the source material is really clear on warning against the comparison trap.
Oh, that's a big one. Comparing yourself to others.
It's so destructive. You know, you look at someone who maybe spent years living abroad, and you compare your 3rd month trying to nail, I don't know, the past conditional tense to their fluency. It just breeds frustration.
And frustration is the enemy of consistency, right? It makes you want to give up.
Exactly. It kills that daily habit. So instead of looking outwards and comparing, the advice is to focus inwards. Focus on what the sources call small wins.
Okay, what does that actually look like for someone aiming for fluency? Define small wins.
It means seeing progress on a micro level, day to day, week to week. It's not just about passing a big exam. A small win is noticing that tricky phrasal verb you struggled with last week. Suddenly, it just came out naturally today. Or it's successfully writing a paragraph expressing a complex idea you couldn't quite formulate before. Or maybe it's just watching a scene in a movie and realizing, hey, I actually followed that rapid-fire dialogue without freezing up.
You have to consciously notice those moments.
You have to.
Yeah.
And acknowledge them, celebrate them internally. Because that little hit of positive reinforcement, that's the dopamine release you need. That's what fuels the commitment to keep going with that daily 15 minutes, even when it feels slow. It becomes a positive feedback loop. Practice, small win, motivation, more practice.
Got it. So, foundational framework. Consistent daily practice, even short bursts, backed up by a patient mindset focused on acknowledging your own small steps forward.
That's the core.
All right. With that established, let's shift gears into the how. Section 2. Maximizing input training, the ear and the eye. This is about how you take in the language effectively.
Right. Optimize consumption, basically, because consumption is how your brain builds its internal library of sounds, structures, vocabulary, everything. We kick this off with tip 2, audio immersion, tune your ear.
And this isn't just having English radio on in the background while you do chores, is it?
No, definitely not. It needs to be active, engaged listening. The goal is specifically to train your auditory system to recognize the sounds and rhythms of English.
The sources stress choosing content you actually enjoy, podcasts you like, audiobooks, interviews on topics you care about. But I want to push on that a bit. Why isn't just enjoyment enough? What should you be actively listening for?
That's a great question. You're listening for the music of the language, what linguists call prosody. This includes the rhythm, the stress patterns, the intonation, the melody.
Melody. How so?
Well, think about it. You can read the words, "What did you say?" with perfect pronunciation for each word. But if you don't use the right rise and fall, the right cadence, it sounds robotic, unnatural.
Okay.
Native speakers connect words, we squash sounds together, elision, reduction, what did you say? Often becomes something closer to would I say, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Listening actively trains your ear to pick up on these connected, reduced forms. And that's absolutely vital for understanding people speaking at a normal, natural pace.
It's like there's this hidden layer of sound, the rhythm and flow, and if you only focus on individual words, you miss a huge part of the meaning. Especially because intonation itself carries meaning, right? Like signaling a question versus a statement, or showing emphasis.
Precisely. Emphasis is huge.
Yeah.
Where you put the stress in a sentence can completely change the implication. So yeah, listening for that soundtrack is key. And for more advanced learners, the sources suggest something interesting.
What's that?
Choose content that's actually slightly above your current comfort zone, maybe something where you only understand, say, 70 or 80%.
Really? Why make it harder?
Because it forces your brain to stretch. It pushes you to figure out meaning from context, to acquire language more naturally rather than just confirming what you already know. It accelerates the learning.
Interesting. Okay, so active listening for rhythm, intonation, and connected speech is key. Now, building on that audio input, tip 3 brings in the visual side. Watch movies and TV shows. This is where a lot of people start, but there's a specific method recommended.
Yes, it's progressive. Phase 1 is crucial. Watch the English content with English subtitles turned on.
English subtitles, not native language ones.
Absolutely. This creates that vital visual auditory connection. You hear the word or phrase, and you simultaneously see it spelled out in context. It lowers the cognitive load dramatically, lets you follow the plot without constantly hitting pause or feeling lost.
Makes sense. And then the important next step is taking the training wheels off.
Exactly. Progressing to watching without any subtitles, this is where you really push yourself out of the comfort zone.
What's the benefit there? Why is that step so important?
2 main things. First, it massively boosts your vocabulary acquisition because you have to rely more on visual cues, the actor's expressions, the situation, to guess the meaning of unknown words. Your inferencing skills get a workout.
Okay, and the second?
Second, and this is critical for fluency, it forces you to process the language at its natural speed and flow. Textbooks often give you clean, slow dialogue. Movies and TV shows, that's how people really talk fast, overlapping, full of idioms.
Messy,
exactly. When the subtitles are gone, your brain has no choice but to try and keep up with that real-time auditory stream. It's tough at first, but it trains your processing speed like nothing else. It directly helps your own eventual speaking speed.
Okay, so we've got active listening and engaged viewing covered. Now, the sources talk about a bridge, something that connects this input phase with actually outputting language. That's tip 10, reading aloud.
Yes, this is such a powerful, often overlooked technique. It's a transitional skill bridging input reading and output speaking.
How does it work? You just grab a book or an article and read it out loud.
Pretty much. Books, news websites, blogs, short stories, whatever interests you. When you read aloud, you're hitting 3 targets at once. You're improving your pronunciation by physically forming the sounds.
Okay.
You're internalizing the natural rhythm and flow of written English, which often mirrors spoken rhythm.
Right.
And you're actually solidifying your comprehension because voicing the words forces you to engage with them more deeply than silent reading.
I think the key there must be the physical act itself, right? What the sources call articulatory practice. You're not just thinking the sound, you're making your mouth, your tongue, your vocal cords actually do the work.
Exactly. You're building muscle memory for speech. It sounds a bit strange, but it's true. Your articulator's lips, tongue, jaw develop a memory for producing certain sounds and sequences of sounds smoothly.
And it links the visual word directly to the spoken sound.
It bypasses that potential internal translation step. You see the word, you say the word, it makes the connection more immediate. For developing smoother, faster speech, this kind of practice is just, well, it's non-negotiable, really.
Okay, that sets us up perfectly for the next big section, which is often the scariest part for learners. Activating output, the practice loop. We've absorbed all this language, now we have to actually use it. Speaking and writing.
And yeah, the biggest hurdle here is almost always fear, isn't it? Fear of making mistakes, fear of sounding stupid, fear of being judged.
Definitely.
Which is why the sources wisely suggest starting in the safest possible environment. Tip 4, solo fluency training.
The classic talk to yourself in English advice. I know it sounds maybe a bit silly or awkward for some people.
It can feel weird at first.
But the source material is really insistent on this. It's one of the fastest routes to building confidence and improving your fluency. Why?
Simple. Zero pressure. Absolutely none. You can practice what some researchers call silent rehearsal or just talk out loud. Use your internal monologue, narrate your day, practice little dialogues in your head, describe what you see around you all in English.
So you're basically running simulations.
Exactly. You're letting your brain practice formulating sentences, searching for vocabulary, playing with grammar structures, but without the stress of someone waiting for you to reply. You make mistakes, you notice them, you self-correct, all internally or in private. It lowers the stakes dramatically.
Okay, that makes sense for speaking confidence. But we also need to formalize the writing practice. That brings us to tip 6. Establish a writing habit with a daily English journal.
Yes, another fantastic, low-stakes, high-impact activity.
Yeah.
The basic idea is super simple. Just write a few lines every day. Could be about your day, your thoughts, something you learned.
Keep it simple to start.
To start, yes. But for learners really pushing for fluency, the journal is a place to challenge yourself. Don't just write, "I had coffee." Try writing a short paragraph, giving your opinion on something you read, or explaining a complex feeling you had.
I see. Pushing the complexity forces you to actively search for more precise vocabulary and structure your thoughts more logically in English.
Precisely. And the core benefit, beyond just practicing writing skills, is that it strongly aids the transition to thinking in English.
How so?
Writing naturally slows down your thought process. It forces you to consciously choose words and construct sentences. If you want to write about why you felt frustrated, you have to actively find and use specific words for emotions, for cause and effect. That intentional retrieval process is what really makes knowledge stick. It turns passive vocabulary you recognize into active vocabulary you can actually use. Think of it as speaking in slow motion.
Okay, writing is slow motion speaking. I like that. So we've built some confidence talking to ourselves. We've started structuring thoughts through writing. Now comes the real test. Tip 7. Real conversation acceleration.
Yep, the pressure cooker, as you called it. There's just no substitute for actually talking with another person. Solo practice builds confidence, but real conversation demands speed, listening comprehension, reaction, adaptation.
It forces you to think on your feet.
Completely. It accelerates your speaking skills in a way that practicing alone just can't replicate, mainly because you're constantly having to understand what the other person is saying in real time and respond appropriately. It's dynamic.
And the practical ways to do this are pretty accessible now, right?
Yeah.
Finding a language exchange partner online, joining interest groups, maybe finding a friend who's also learning or a native speaker.
Loads of options. The key, though, is to find situations where you're pushed slightly, just slightly outside your comfort zone. Not so much that you panic, but enough that you have to actively work to communicate.
Why is that push so important?
Because that immediacy, that need to respond fairly quickly, starts to break down the reliance on translation. That mental habit of hearing English translating to your native language, thinking of a reply translating back to English, it's too slow for a real conversation.
Clear.
When you're forced to respond faster, your brain starts looking for shortcuts. It begins to access the English directly. That's how you build those high-speed neural pathways for spontaneous speech.
Right. Breaking the translation habit. Okay, now there's one more stage in activating output, which is taking it out of structured practice and into the real world. Tip 11. Use English in real-life situations.
Yeah, moving beyond the classroom or the specific practice session, this is about attaching real utility, real consequences to your English use. It solidifies the learning incredibly effectively.
So we're talking about things like ordering food in English, asking for directions if you're traveling, maybe writing a comment on social media in English.
Exactly, or sending a work email, asking a question in a shop. These aren't practice drills anymore. They're actual functional tasks where communication matters.
Okay, but let me push back a bit here. For a lot of learners, especially maybe more introverted ones, that sounds absolutely terrifying. The potential for misunderstanding or just feeling embarrassed seems really high. Do the sources offer ways to handle that fear?
That's a really important point, and yes, they do. The key is to start small and controlled. Choose low-stakes interactions first, maybe interactions where you can even mentally rehearse or pre-script what you're going to say.
Like ordering coffee. You probably know exactly what you need to say.
Precisely. Think through the 2 or 3 sentences you'll need beforehand. This gives you a successful experience without massive cognitive stress. Then, you gradually increase the complexity. Maybe asking an open-ended question at a museum or trying a brief bit of small talk.
Building confidence incrementally.
Exactly. And the interesting psychological insight here is that even that slight pressure to communicate successfully makes the language stick better. The memory gets tied to a real-world outcome, maybe even a slight emotional response, which cements it more strongly than just doing a textbook exercise.
It makes English feel less like a school subject and more like a useful tool.
Okay. And before we move into the final section on advanced hacks, there's one more output tool focused on self-correction. Tip 12, auditory self-correction, recording yourself.
Yes, such a simple technique, but genuinely transformative for many learners. Just record short snippets of yourself speaking, maybe reading a paragraph aloud or answering a practice question. Then, and this is the critical part, listen back to it. Why is listening back so different from just hearing yourself as you speak?
Because when you're speaking, your brain is primarily in production mode. It's busy planning what to say next, finding the words, managing the grammar. It's not really listening objectively to the sounds you're actually making.
Okay.
But when you listen back to the recording, you shift into audience mode or evaluator mode, you get some distance, and suddenly you hear things you completely missed while speaking.
Like what?
You might hear where your intonation was flat, or where you consistently mispronounced a certain vowel sound, maybe where your rhythm was a bit jerky, or where you hesitated awkwardly. You hear the gaps between your intended speech and your actual speech.
So it allows you to compare the ideal sound, maybe what you heard during your audio immersion, with what you actually produced.
Exactly. It helps you triangulate.
Yeah.
It's especially good for catching what we call fossilized errors.
Fossilized errors.
Yeah, those persistent mistakes, often in pronunciation or a specific grammar point that you've been making for so long you don't even notice them anymore. They've become automatic. Recording forces them out into the open where you can finally address them.
Wow, okay. Powerful technique. That sets us up really well for this final section, next level hacks. We're moving beyond the basics of input and output now, into the more nuanced strategies that help you sound less like a learner and more, well, natural.
Yeah, these are the things that add that layer of polish and fluency. We start with tip 5, which goes back to vocabulary, but challenges the way most people learn it. Contextual vocabulary mastery.
Right, the sources were really clear. Ditch the isolated word lists. Just memorizing lists of words with their definitions is basically useless long-term.
It's incredibly inefficient. Those words just float around in your head with no connections, no anchors. They're hard to remember and even harder to use correctly.
So what's the effective way? The sticky method.
You absolutely must learn words in context, within sentences. When you find a new word, don't just jot down the word and its definition. Write down the entire sentence you found it in.
Okay, capture the original context.
Yes. And then this is the really crucial step. Immediately try to use that new word in, say, 3 new sentences of your own. Make them relevant to you, your life, your opinions.
Why is creating your own sentences so important?
Because it forces you to actively manipulate the word. You have to think about its meaning, yes, but also its grammatical function, who it typically partners with its collocations. Does it take a preposition? Is it formal or informal? Writing your own sentences tests your understanding and embeds the word much more deeply.
So instead of just learning ubiquitous means found everywhere, you learn it from a sentence like, smartphones are now ubiquitous in modern society. And then you might write, finding a coffee shop seems ubiquitous in this city, or that actor's face is ubiquitous on billboards right now.
Exactly. You're learning the word and its typical environment. It gets linked in your brain to related concepts, grammatical patterns, appropriate situations. This makes it infinitely easier to retrieve and use correctly when you're actually speaking, because it's part of a network, not just an isolated fact.
That makes so much sense. And it flows perfectly into the next tip, tip 8. Speaking in chunks. This feels like a really fundamental insight into how native speakers actually operate.
It absolutely is. It's one of the biggest differences between learner speech and native speech. Fluent speakers rarely build sentences one word at a time, like Lego bricks. We deploy prefabricated chunks of language.
Chunks? Like what?
Common phrases, collocations, sentence starters, idioms. Things like, how's it going? Nice to meet you, at the end of the day. On the other hand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hang on a second. These function almost like single units.
So, trying to translate at the end of the day, word for word from your native language would probably sound very strange.
Or be completely meaningless. But if you learn that whole chunk means something like ultimately, or when all is said and done, then boom, you can slot it into your conversation instantly and sound much more natural.
And this ties into collocations too, right? Those words that just naturally go together in English.
Hugely important. Collocations are word partnerships that native speakers expect to hear. If you break them, even if your grammar is technically okay, your speech sounds off, unnatural.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Classic ones are, we make a decision, not do a decision. We talk about heavy rain, not usually strong rain.
Yeah.
You commit a crime, not do a crime. You pay attention, not give attention.
There are thousands of these.
Thousands. And learning the common ones is a massive shortcut to fluency. Honestly, learning maybe 200 really useful chunks and strong collocations will probably give you more conversational power and confidence than memorizing 500 random nouns. It just frees up so much mental energy when you're speaking.
Because you're not building from scratch every time. Okay, so we're learning words in context using chunks. But for them to sound right, we need tip 9. Prioritize pronunciation and intonation.
Yes, and the advice is to focus on this stuff early. Don't leave it till the end. Bad pronunciation habits, once ingrained, are incredibly difficult to fix later on.
And it doesn't matter how perfect your grammar or vocab is if people can't understand you easily, or if your rhythm sounds completely wrong.
Exactly. Communication breaks down. And it's not just about individual sounds, although those are crucial things like distinguishing minimal pairs.
Minimal pairs, like words that sound really similar but have different meanings.
Yeah, pairs that differ by only one sound. The classic example for many learners is the short E's in ship versus the long E sound in sheep.
Ship sheep. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Or maybe cat versus cut, bat versus bet. If you can't reliably hear the difference, you certainly won't be able to produce it reliably, and that leads to misunderstandings. That's why tools like Youglish or Forvo are so helpful.
How do they work?
They let you type in a word or phrase and hear it pronounced by native speakers in real contexts, like YouTube videos for Youglish or just audio clips on Forvo. You get exposure to different accents, natural speed, and how words sound in actual sentences.
That sounds incredibly useful for tuning your ear to specific sounds.
Yeah.
And beyond individual sounds, we have to come back to intonation again, don't we? The music.
Absolutely critical. Intonation carries so much emotional nuances, distinguishing questions from statements, highlighting important information. A rising pitch at the end usually signals a question or uncertainty. A falling pitch often indicates a statement or certainty.
And sentence stress, too, emphasizing the right word.
Oh, yeah. If you stress the wrong word in a sentence, you can completely change the intended meaning, or just sound confusing, even if all the words themselves are correct. Getting the music right is just as important as getting the words right for sounding natural.
Okay. This is all leading towards the ultimate goal, isn't it? The truly transformative step. It sounds like it requires a lot of internal effort. Tip 13, bypassing translation, start thinking in English.
This is the watershed moment, really, where English stops being this foreign object you manipulate and starts becoming the actual operating system your brain uses for certain thoughts.
Because most learners, especially early on, are doing that constant back and forth, right? Hear English, translate to native language, think of reply, translate, reply back to English, speak.
Exactly, and that multi-step process is just too slow. It's the major bottleneck preventing real-time, spontaneous fluency. The goal is to cut out the middleman, your native language.
Force those direct connections between the English word or phrase and the actual concept or idea itself. How on earth do you start doing that? It sounds really abstract.
You start small, really small, microscopic almost. Begin with just labeling things in your environment directly in English, internally. Look at your desk, this is a keyboard, that's my mug, hot coffee. Simple sensory input, direct label.
No translation involved.
None needed. Then move to internal narration of simple actions. As you're doing something, narrate it silently in English. Okay, I'm walking to the kitchen now. I need to find my keys. I'm gonna make some tea.
Just describing your immediate reality internally.
Yes. And as that gets comfortable, you scale up. Start narrating slightly more complex thoughts or plans. Mentally review your to-do list for the day in English. Plan out a hypothetical conversation you need to have later entirely in your head in English.
So if I'm thinking about my workday, I force myself to use English internally. Like, okay, first I need to prioritize these emails, or maybe I should delegate that task, or I wonder if that meeting will run late.
Exactly. You're actively using more complex structures, specific vocabulary, logical connectors, all within your own mind. You're building a sustained internal monologue in English.
And the theory is that deliberately practicing this forces that reliance on the native language translation to fade away.
It forces it to atrophy, essentially. It's like exercising a muscle. The more you use the direct English pathway, the stronger it gets, and the less you rely on the old translation route. It's gradual, definitely takes conscious effort, but the end result is that you start to genuinely think directly in English, at least for certain topics or situations. And that is the key to unlocking spontaneous speech, because the delay is gone.
Wow. That feels like the real end game for fluency. Okay, one last tip to cover, and it's often the most dreaded one: grammar. But tip 14 frames it differently. Grammar in action.
Yes, and this is crucial. The sources strongly advise against the traditional method of just trying to memorize endless grammar rules in isolation.
Like conjugation tables and abstract definitions.
Exactly. That kind of knowledge might help you pass a test, but it's incredibly difficult to access and apply quickly enough when you're actually trying to speak or write naturally. It's too academic, too detached.
So instead of memorizing rules explicitly,
we need to focus on how grammar actually works in real communication, inside real sentences. It's about pattern recognition.
Shifting from explicit rule learning to more implicit, input-based grammar learning.
That's a great way to put it. When you're reading or listening, all that input we talked about earlier, you shouldn't just be passively absorbing, you should be actively noticing the patterns.
Yeah, noticing how.
For example, instead of trying to memorize a complicated chart explaining the third conditional, you read or hear 10 examples like, if I had known you were coming, I would have baked a cake. And you consciously notice the pattern. Okay. After if in this past hypothetical, it's always the past perfect. And the result part uses would have plus the past participle.
You absorb the structure through repeated exposure in meaningful contexts.
Yes. You see how it's used to express a specific meaning, in this case, past regret or hypothetical. This approach connects directly back to learning vocabulary in context and using chunks. When you learn a chunk like at the end of the day, you're not just learning words. You're implicitly learning its grammatical role as an introductory phrase that sets up the main clause.
It makes grammar feel more intuitive, more functional, rather than this scary list of rules to be memorized and potentially broken.
Precisely. By constantly analyzing your input, looking for these recurring patterns, your brain starts to internalize the rules unconsciously. It becomes part of your linguistic intuition, making it much easier and faster to retrieve the correct structure when you need it in conversation.
Okay, that covers all 15 tips.
Wow.
It's a comprehensive picture from the foundational daily habit right through to these sophisticated hacks for sounding natural and thinking directly in the language.
It really is a journey. If we kind of synthesize everything, the path to genuine fluency seems to involve Establishing those consistent daily habits, really optimizing how you consume English to pick up native patterns, actively pushing yourself to produce language both in safe environments and now in the real world, using smarter strategies like learning vocabulary and context, leveraging chunks of language, paying close attention to the sounds and music of English.
And ultimately, that big internal shift.
And ultimately, training your own mind to actually operate directly in English, bypassing translation.
It really emphasizes that the transformation is possible. English isn't some innate talent. It's a skill. And like any skill, it grows the more you use it, especially if you use it consistently and effectively, and crucially, if you find ways to enjoy the process.
That enjoyment factor is huge. If you're genuinely interested in the podcasts you listen to, the shows you watch, the articles you read, the learning stops feeling like a chore. It just becomes immersion.
Right. So let's project forward a bit. Imagine yourself, the listener, 6 months from now. You've applied these ideas consistently. What's the result? Maybe speaking more confidently, understanding movies without needing subtitles all the time, writing emails or messages clearly without agonizing over every word.
That breakthrough is absolutely achievable. These 15 techniques, used together and consistently, really do provide a roadmap to get there.
Okay, so to wrap up, here's the final thought we want to leave you with. It ties together that need for daily practice we started with, tip 1, that ultimate goal of thinking directly in English, tip 13, and the mindset of patient, sustained progress, tip 15. If English proficiency is truly a skill, one honed by sustained effort, particularly that internal effort of thinking, then maybe the biggest accelerator isn't just the external practice, like that conversation partner you meet once a week. Maybe it's the internal linguistic world you choose to inhabit every single day, every waking moment you can manage it.
That's a powerful way to frame it.
So the question is, what happens to your